This player helped fuel one of the most impressive runs a team has had in Major League Baseball, though this player never actually played for that team. This is Delmon Young, and the Tampa Bay Rays traded him before the 2008 season. Little did anyone know that trade would shape the Rays franchise for years to come. A franchise that doesn't have many star players, a franchise that doesn't have as many resources as most teams do. That single trade would result in one of the biggest and most infamous series of trades in MLB history. It kicked off a chain of events that is still going on today and will be going on well into the future. This single trade evolved into a legacy demonstrating the Rays' unique ability to be, well, the Rays. Notorious for adapting and thriving in a league often dominated by big spenders, and there's no better way to explain it than to look at the Delmon Young trade tree. By the way, only 3% of you watching this are subscribed, so if you enjoy the video, consider subscribing. It's completely free, and you can always unsubscribe at any time. Looking in from the outside, the recent run that the Rays have been on doesn't seem too crazy. I mean, they haven't won a World Series, they only made one, and that was in the shortened 2020 season. Yes, they made the postseason 5 seasons in a row, but that's not really that impressive, is it? For a team like the Rays, though, this is actually very impressive. Looking over the past 10 years, the Rays have always been near the bottom when it comes to payroll. Other lower payroll teams like the Pirates, Marlins, and A's have not had anything close to the sustained success that the Rays have had. A team that's also seen a lot of success in the past decade is the New York Yankees. The Yankees, of course, are in the same division as the Rays, and they have been the two best teams in that division over the past 5 or so seasons. Looking at their win totals year after year in the last decade, you can see that the teams are pretty close to one another. The Yankees hold the edge with 855 wins to the Rays' 816. But, of course, the Rays and Yankees couldn't be farther apart in the way that their teams are built. This graph depicting each team's payroll shows that the teams are very different. The Yankees have spent over $2 billion on their players over the past decade, while the Rays have spent under $700 million. If you want to talk about efficiency, the Rays have spent just $831,000 on players for every win. The Yankees, on the other hand, have spent nearly $2.4 million on players for every win. In a vacuum, yes, the Rays' run doesn't necessarily look like a dominant dynasty, but with the situation they are in and the resources that they have, it's very impressive. This kind of success doesn't just happen overnight, though, and it can be traced back all the way to 2003, when Delmon Young was drafted. Delmon Young was taken first overall in the 2003 MLB draft by the Tampa Bay Rays. He was ranked as the third best prospect in the league by Baseball America when he made his major league debut in 2006. He would not immediately live up to this hype though, posting just .9 WAR in his first full season in the league. He's a first overall pick though, and a top 3 prospect in all of Major League Baseball, so you obviously can't give up on him this soon, right? Well, that would make sense, but the Rays aren't the Rays because they just go out and do the most obvious move. The Rays did give up on him and traded him to the Twins shortly after the 2007 season ended. Most organizations would fall for the sunk cost fallacy that comes with picking a bust at the number 1 overall selection. They would hold on to him and hope that he turns a corner. They watch his value fall and fall year after year as the hype surrounding the once highly touted prospect fades away. The Rays, though, did not hesitate to jump ship on Delmon Young when they saw his value start to slip. This decision would prove to be one of the best decisions that the franchise has ever made. This trade would soon kick off one of the most fascinating chain reactions in MLB history and give birth to the legendary Delmon Young trade tree. The Delmon Young trade tree consists of many generations and a lot of talented players. There are a lot of trades to go over here, but it all starts at the top with Mr. Delmon Young himself. On November 28, 2007, the Rays traded Young to the Twins along with infielder Brendan Harris and outfielder Jason Pridey. The latter two players are relatively insignificant to this talk as they were worth a combined negative .2 WAR in their careers. They're just throw-ins for this trade that was centered around the former number 1 overall pick in Delmon Young. In return, the Rays got veteran shortstop Jason Bartlett and a former top 20 pitching prospect in Matt Garza. These two players were relatively productive during their time with the Rays, but the true value that they bring is yet to come, especially with Matt Garza. After 3 seasons with the Rays, Bartlett was traded to the Padres with 1 year of control left. The return in this trade was rather underwhelming. The Rays got a 4-player package that included Cole Figueroa, Brandon Gomes, Cesar Ramos, and Adam Russell. These 4 players never did much for the Rays or in the majors in general. Garza was traded just a month later with 3 years of team control left. This meant his value was still quite high. The return included Robinson Chirinos, Sam Fuld, and Brandon Guyer. The key piece of this deal, though, was the 27th overall ranked prospect in Chris Archer. Archer, as many of you may know, turned into a multiple-time All-Star with the Rays and established himself as one of the better pitchers in the league. With the Rays, Archer pitched over 1,000 innings with an ERA of 3.71, a FIP of 3.49, while striking out over 25% of the batters that he faced. More importantly to this story, Archer also serves as the root to the most infamous subtree in the Delmon Young trade tree. At the 2018 trade deadline, the Rays were over 500, but were 9 games out of a wildcard spot. The postseason wasn't impossible, but it was highly unlikely. Chris Archer had just 1.5 years of control left and wasn't looking as dominant as he once was. These conditions led to one of the most iconic Rays trades of all time taking place. Archer was sent north to the Pittsburgh Pirates in return for Austin Meadows, Tyler Glasnow, and a player to be named later. That player to be named later turned out to be a very significant one, as it was revealed to be Shane Baz. Both Glasnow and Meadows peaked in the top 10 on MLB Pipeline's prospect rankings, but struggled in the majors on the Pirates. Baz was a big-stuff, high-ceiling starter similar to Glasnow. He was just 1 year removed from being the 12th overall pick in the 2017 draft. Meadows still had 6 years of control left and Glasnow had 5. Getting 3 young, controllable players in exchange for 1.5 years of an aging Chris Archer seemed like a steal at the time, and today we can look back on it as one of the most lopsided trades in recent history. Archer was not good for the Pirates. He was worth negative .2 WAR over his 1.5 years there. That means the Pirates were better off just putting a replacement level player out there. Austin Meadows became an All-Star in 2019 for the Rays, and Glasnow was one of the best pitchers in the league when healthy. This alone would make the trade great for the Rays, but of course this story does not end there. Meadows was traded before the 2022 season for Isaac Paredes from the Detroit Tigers. Paredes wasn't a top-tier prospect, but he was a young, controllable player. Are you sensing a pattern here? Just 2 years later, Glasnow would also be sent out the door after the Rays used up all of his control. He was traded to the Dodgers for Johnny DeLuca and Ryan Pepiot, 2 young, controllable players. Just when you thought this was over, it keeps getting better. Then Paredes was traded at the trade deadline for Christopher Morel, Hunter Biggie, and Ty Johnson. Okay, that was a lot of movement in a short amount of time, so let's zoom out here and take a deep breath. This diagram is a great way to represent all of these transactions. It allows us to trace back the path of any player all the way up to Delmon Young. For example, we just talked about Christopher Morel being acquired by the Rays in 2024 for Isaac Paredes. The Rays got Paredes in return for Austin Meadows, who was part of the Chris Archer trade. Chris Archer was part of the return that the Rays got for Matt Garza, and Garza was one of the original players involved in the Delmon Young trade. Even though the Morel trade happened 17 years later, it still stems from the original Delmon Young trade. Now, to see the true value the Rays got back with this trade, I have a few visuals that will hopefully paint a good picture for you. Here's the first one. Yeah, it's a pretty lopsided trade. Delmon Young was worth about 2 WAR for the rest of his career, while the return that the Rays got has been worth almost 70 WAR. The Rays turned a first overall bust into generations of sustained talent. If this graph somehow doesn't show you the lopsidedness of this trade, then what about this one? This one shows the value of Delmon Young every season versus the value that the Rays turned him into via the trade. Every year, the return that the Rays got has been worth significantly more value-wise than Delmon Young ever was. And while the Delmon Young line lays flat at 0, the return is still going strong into 2024. In an alternate world where the Rays didn't trade Delmon Young, they would be in a much worse situation. This graph shows you how valuable each player was in the year that they were acquired. These trades span 17 years apart. Ryan Pepiot, Johnny DeLuca, Hunter Biggie, and Christopher Morel were all added in 2024 and will be with the Rays for the foreseeable future, allowing even more value to come down the road. 8 players in the tree have been worth more WAR themselves than Delmon Young was after the trade. Sam Fuld, Brandon Guyer, Austin Meadows, Matt Garza, Tyler Glasnow, Isaac Paredes, Jason Bartlett, and Chris Archer were all worth more than 2 WAR during their time with the Rays. Ryan Pepiot and Shane Baz will certainly shatter this mark soon, and Johnny DeLuca and Christopher Morel have a pretty good chance of doing it too. This all may seem like a complex approach and a little over the top, but this kind of structure is how the Rays defy the odds of Major League Baseball. This is how the Rays sustain success despite having a limited amount of resources to work with. As we learned before, the Rays don't spend much money when it comes to their players. Now, that's not the front office's decision. I'm sure they would love to spend some money and get some big-name free agents. There's just one thing getting in their way, and that's the owner, Stuart Sternberg. He doesn't quite have the best reputation amongst the fans, and a big reason for that can be seen in this chart. The Rays were dead last when it came to the percentage of revenue that they spent on their payroll, basically saying that they're making money, but that money's not being reinvested into the product on the field. Of course, this is not foreign to Major League Baseball by any means. Unfortunately, there are many owners who take this same approach, like John Fisher with the Athletics and Bob Nutting with the Pirates. The difference with the Rays, though, is that they can actually sustain success. Even in a down year in 2024 with a lot of their key players injured, they still are around 500. Just compare that to a down year like the A's or Pirates have. The way contracts work in Major League Baseball is like this. A player gets called up to the majors, and after his first full season, his service time clock starts ticking. Usually during the first 3 years of service time, the player is paid the minimum contract, which in 2024 is $740,000. Very cheap. Then the next 3 years, a player goes through what is called arbitration. These 3 years are a little more expensive, but players are only allowed to negotiate with their current team and don't have much leverage. This 6-year time span is very valuable because after these 6 years are up, they become free agents, and the price for that player will skyrocket as he's now allowed to negotiate with every team in the league, which drastically increases the demand for the player. The Rays front office knows that with the budget that they have, these highly priced free agents are just not going to be possible. They need to recycle what they have. They trade away players that have less control for players that have a lot of control, and then once those players' control is coming to an end, they get traded. It's just a never-ending cycle. Now, just getting any young players in return isn't going to do much on its own. You have to get the right young players. The Rays are notorious for their scouting and development of young players, especially pitchers. That's a big reason why this tree has been able to go on for so long and will continue to grow. There are still 6 players active for the Rays remaining in the tree. These 6 players are Shane Baz, Johnny DeLuca, Ryan Pepiot, Christopher Morel, Hunter Biggie, and Ty Johnson. Shane Baz and Ryan Pepiot are both young pitchers with great stuff and a pretty high ceiling. These types of players are the players that the Rays thrive with. These two are, in my opinion, the 2 highest value players remaining in this tree. They both aren't free agents until 2029, allowing the Rays plenty of time to get value out of them and then trade them to start the cycle all over again. Johnny DeLuca and Christopher Morel are both players that possess a few great tools. DeLuca is an exceptional athlete that plays great defense in the outfield, but the offense has yet to come around. Morel has tremendous bat speed and hits the ball very hard, but he strikes out a lot and has no position on defense. With the tools they have, though, it's a great start to build around, and if the Rays can develop these guys, they could be very solid everyday players in their lineup. Hunter Biggie has been great in 2024 in a small sample, posting a sub-1 ERA and a sub-3 FIP. He has great stuff, and if you can figure out how to control it, he will be a pretty good reliever. Last but not least is Ty Johnson. He was taken in the 15th round of the 2023 MLB draft and has pitched pretty well despite his draft position. For the Rays in 2024, he's pitched 23 innings to a .78 ERA and a .93 FIP with a strikeout rate of nearly 50%. This is in high A though, so it's best not to get too excited until we see him progress into Double and Triple A. These 6 players hold the only remaining seeds that the future of this tree relies on. The Rays have mastered the art of turning limited resources into sustained success through crafty trades and player development. The Delmon Young trade tree is a perfect example of this strategy in action. By consistently acquiring young controllable talent and developing them into key contributors, the Rays have built a foundation that allows them to compete with the big spenders in Major League Baseball. This trade tree isn't just a fascinating look at one of the most lopsided trades in history, it's a testament to the Rays' ability to adapt, innovate, and thrive in an environment where they're outclassed financially. And as the tree continues to grow, the legacy of that original trade lives on, fueling the Rays' improbable success story. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.